that massive youth unemployment risk that we have. Our unemployment risk just gets worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, I mean, the major risk then, anarchy, etc., that follows it, is just too ghastly to contemplate. We have to make sure we get it right. And that's why it now becomes almost like priority number one. And for me, in my own day-to-day work, the two priorities I focus on are safety and energy. And I do those two things primarily because those are the key inhibitors for economic growth, jobs, investment, etc.
Last week, the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, said in his own Premier's budget vote debate that the Western Cape has generated over 1,000 megawatts of electricity, up by almost twice as much in the past couple of years, from 558 in the year 2000. We're going to find out more from him now and get a general update on some of the other major issues that the Western Cape is busy with. Premier, good to be talking with you again. And it's I suppose you always have to wear a jacket and tie when you are in the position that you're in. But it's nice to see that you're hard at work today.
Thanks, Alec. I actually try not to wear a jacket and tie. I think that it should rather be sleeves rolled up and getting down to work. And so I've really tried to change that environment since I've come in as the Premier. We've actually got within government, we're busy with what we call a culture journey. And what is your culture? I will always wear a suit and tie to Parliament. I think the big problem we have in Parliament is that it's not at the level it should be. It's kind of a bit in the gutter. So you need to keep this kind of dress code in Parliament. And of course, I've just come from a meeting with the whole delegation from the EU. And of course, the EU is our biggest trading partner. It is a massive source of foreign direct investment, a massive source of tourism. And so when I meet with ambassadors and international business people, I put a tie on. But the rest of the time, I believe in sleeves rolled up and getting down to work. So you don't often see me in a tie.
Well, we're going to talk about electricity in a moment, but as you've opened the door to the EU, I'm now a very happy resident in Hermanus. And one of the things that has struck me here is the number of foreigners, not just who visit, and please may they bring more of their euros to us, but actually who are investing in this town and elsewhere in the Western Cape. And it's almost like they're buying sight unseen nowadays. Are you seeing in the official data these flows coming from the EU? And indeed, what was the conversation like today?
So, I mean, we weren't talking about how many EU citizens are moving to the region, but it does happen all the time. And it's always interesting to me when I have a discussion with a South African who's telling me that they're packing up and going somewhere else. And then the next conversation I have with someone from anywhere around the world, and predominantly, I mean, that's our biggest source market, someone from the EU, some country in the EU saying, wow, what an amazing place you have here. And of course, I don't think they're blind to our challenges, but, the whole world has challenges. A lot of the discussion is, what is it that's changing in the world? How do the regions work together? So there's almost like a dichotomy of two conversations happening globally at the moment. There's the one conversation which is very much sort of moving towards populism, nationalism, exiting, breaking up. And then there's the other side saying, guys, we have to work on this together. And of course, in the middle of this, specifically from the EU, there's a war. And there's a war, and they know a lot about energy shortfalls. I mean, they've just gone through a winter where they've had huge energy shortfalls, load shedding, but their load shedding does not happen like ours, where they turn off the power. All they do is they just really increase the price. And then the citizens themselves turn off their power because they're just not going to pay that kind of money. So they have load shedding as well, but it's just a different kind. I don't know if we'd ever be able to get into that just yet. I think it will come as our energy system changes to trading markets. We've got a pilot running in George where people are going to be able to buy and sell electricity depending on the price, and it's run on an app. I mean, that's what happens in Europe all the time. You turn on your washing machine when the price drops, or you turn on your geyser when the price drops, and you do that through your app, whether you're out at a restaurant, whether you're at work, or you're at home. And I think we're going to move towards that environment over the next few years, probably faster than anybody really thinks.
But the inflow of direct foreign investment into particularly the Western Cape is quite profound. This week, I phoned a UK company on a UK telephone number to complain about something. They kept me on the line for a long time. And of course, where did they send me to eventually when you got through the select 1 for this and 2 for that? To somebody with a distinctly South African accent who is based in the Cape, and she was very good, and she helped me through the issues that I needed. How much of that are you seeing?
So there are in excess of 50,000 citizens here in the Western Cape who sit on phones answering calls for different companies around the world, and predominantly they are based in the EU, companies coming out of the UK and the EU, because the timeline really works well. But it's not only that. We've seen a huge expansion in back office processing services going to the US, and even expanding into the East. And it's also interesting that it's not only South African companies doing business, it's those international companies investing here as well. And we've got companies based out of India who are, I suppose, India and Sri Lanka. These are big countries that focus on back office processing, and their businesses are saying to mitigate their risk and competitiveness, they're investing here as well. So you'll see a company that will be answering phones in India, somewhere out of Bangalore or wherever, and now suddenly they've also got a branch that's answering phones out of Cape Town. And it's quite a nice ecosystem. We've been running a platform for many years now where government meets with the CEOs of these companies on a quarterly basis all together. And that's one unique offering that we put on the table. And these CEOs, so that never happens anywhere else in the world, because they're all competing head on with each other. And what we as government say is, let's all have a dinner once a quarter, and we are not interested in raising issues that between your competitive edges, etc. But as a sector, what are the issues that are blocking you? It could be a visa issue. It could be a technology or an ICT connection issue. And primarily what we're finding, it's a skills issue, and it's a skills issue in middle management. So then that says, well, then how do we engage with our universities and our colleges, and how are they helping? And you'll see a lot of money in our budget now looking at the BPO sector and enabling young people to attain the skills that are being demanded by these very companies. That's why we know there's 50,000 jobs there already, and growing very nicely. And also it's decentralizing. So the whole point of it is you answering a phone in the Western Cape or in Cape Town. Up until now, it's always been the city center. Now we've got a training college in Mitchell's Plain. We've got the first call centers coming out of Mitchell's Plain, because people are now saying, well, let's invest where the people are, because then we actually cut out that traveling component. We don't have to have people sitting in traffic. It's very easy. And there's some pilot projects running now where actually people are logging on based on the Wi-Fi system. So you don't even go to the office. You sit at home and you log on. And in actual fact, that pilot's been running for a few years now out of Delft, which is very interesting. And so it's the nice thing for me, it's our poorer areas that really need those jobs. And that's where those companies are now investing, which is exciting.
Well, the whole job creation story for the Western Cape has been well articulated. Virtually all the jobs created in South Africa are being created in your province. So before we get into why and what's different, you're acting like a service provider. You've told us that. But the big issue that we have on the table right now is electricity. And the comment that you made, or the discussion in your own budget vote last week about the Western Cape having virtually doubled the amount of electricity that is being put into the grid to over 1,000 megawatts. Now, 1,000 megawatts is not really, it's substantial, but in the context of 25,000 for the country, it's still a heck of a way to go. But maybe unpack that for us, if you would, Premier, and explain whether this growth that you've achieved so far in the last 3 years is going to continue.
So it's going to actually grow exponentially more. We've set ourselves a target now for own generation. And when I say own generation, it's not about us setting up an SOE. It's about private sector putting power into the grid, but for the region. So at the moment, we use 4,000 megawatts in the Western Cape at our peak. And we've put a target now of 5,700 megawatts is what we would like to see between now and 2035. So in other words, planning for expansion and growth. And so that is the plan. Up until October last year, it wasn't a major focus area. Now it's become a major focus area. Up until then, for the last few years, we've looked at it, and that's why I can say, how many megawatts are in the system. That just over 1,000 megawatts is not coming into the solely municipal or Western Cape system for the Western Cape. It's actually going, a vast amount of it is actually going into the national grid as part of renewable energy. There is a fair component in the city of Cape Town itself, which is going at the moment, I want to say, off the grid. So when we ran the Energy Game Changer, which was a few years ago, we were really looking in the 1 megawatt space. How do we get households and businesses to play in that 1 megawatt space and mitigate risk? Because, of course, we've been battling with load shedding for 15 years now. So at the end of that project, directly, it was 134 megawatts. But those 134 megawatts were actually 134 megawatts off the grid, because they were taking themselves off the system, which does create a bit of a problem for us, because our municipalities are not getting that income anymore. And that's why it's so important that you saw in the city of Cape Town now, Jordan Hill-Lewis has now said, we will give you cash for your energy. Up until then, if you did get anything in return, you got almost a write-off of other energy that you used. So if you used 1,000 Rand a month worth of energy and you put 500 Rand a month back in it, you could claim that back from your energy bill, but you wouldn't get it back in cash. So there was no incentive to put in, extra power on your roof than what you needed. You would put in what you needed, and then you would more than likely not even connect to the grid. So now we incentivizing those connections to the grid, and you'll see it rolling out into the other municipalities as well. That's what they call everybody refers to it now as the Vietnam model. In South Africa, we are not incentivizing it nearly enough, or what they did incentivize it with in Vietnam. Vietnam put, billions over 20 years into it. 10 to 15 billion Rand dollars a year goes into the Vietnam model for the next probably 15, 16 years still to go. We've got now a national tax incentive, which gives you about a 20% advantage for 2 years. It's not very much. And only gives you a couple of thousand Rand as a household. The city now is incentivizing it slightly as well. So we give you a bit more than you would pay for if you bought energy from Eskom. Of course, these are not really sustainable models, but they are imperative and necessary for us to start to move beyond levels of load shedding. And this is all interconnected with jobs, with foreign investment, because if energy fails, then all of those fail too. So we've got to make sure that energy is something that is now a key focus. You would see that as part of my budget speech, we've put in the province 1.1 billion now into our energy budget, which has never been budgeted for in a province before. Municipalities have had budgets, but for their own grid investment, because they've always just bought from Eskom, put a profit onto it, sold it through their grid, which they invest into, and then charge the client. So they've obviously got to make some money out of running the system, setting up the accounts, getting the money in. But they, on average, between 17 and 19% is what municipalities make out of the sale of electricity. They have some costs, but they also transfer some of those profits over to subsidize other issues in a municipality. That whole model has to change right now. But the critical thing is we've got to do it with speed. And as when I engage with our municipalities, it's better to be faster in the system, because that will help you retain your jobs and keep investment going. And the city of Cape Town, they can mitigate up to 2 levels of load shedding already, and you can already see that from an investment point of view. That's why last year 129,000 citizens moved to this province from other parts of the country, none other than yourself. And you have moved not even to a region that's actually able to mitigate the Eskom load shedding levels just yet, but our municipalities are really working and moving very fast. And my prediction is that we will stay ahead of the curve because we are actually ahead of the curve. Now, I've put 1.1 billion into the budget. Jordan, now the city of Cape Town, has put 2.3 billion into their budget over the next 3 years. My prediction is that there's probably going to be about 4 billion now just in the Western Cape in the budgets now over the next couple of weeks, that you'll see around about 4 billion as an intent from local government and provincial government to say this is how serious we are about fixing the energy system, because we know if we don't fix it, well, basically, as they say, you just turn the lights off. When you turn the lights off, we lose those jobs that we have got, that massive youth unemployment risk that we have. Our unemployment risk just gets worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, I mean, the major risk, then anarchy, etc., that follows it is just too ghastly to contemplate. We have to make sure we get it right. And that's why it now becomes almost like priority number one. And for me, in my own day-to-day work, the two priorities I focus on are safety and energy. And I do those two things primarily because those are the key inhibitors for economic growth, jobs, investment, etc.
That's an interesting point, bringing in safety there as well, because on the energy side, as you've explained to us and articulated very well, you now have almost the power in your own hands. You can unleash human potential. You can pay people for making the investments themselves. But on safety, on the SA police, on security, are you making much progress on that front?
So, first of all, it's a major fight. And, you know, the harder we push, the more Bicky clearly seems to dig his heels in. The more I get the comments about not over my dead body. But I think that what we've shown, and of course we've had a pandemic in between from when I first announced it, but I think what we have shown in dealing with safety, using technology, using data and evidence, what we've shown is you can make a difference. So you will now see that the murder rate in the Western Cape is now growing slower than the murder rate in the rest of the country. Cape Town was always, spoken about in the Parliament about being the crime capital of South Africa, the murder capital of South Africa. There was a document just came out yesterday that showed we're sitting now at number 20 if you rank cities in the world, and you will see the metros of other cities in Africa are now sitting in the top 5, and Cape Town's moved down to the 20th on that position. Now, what we've done, and obviously, I put in initially 1 billion. We spent 2.3 billion now on safety issues. We have only got 1,300 safety officers. We call them LEAP officers, law enforcement advancement plan, which is the LEAP program. We've only got 1,300. My initial plan was to put 3,000 in place, but of course then we had a pandemic, and our budgets have just been slashed everywhere because the energy crisis. We just don't have that kind of income. But 1,300 officers now, using technology, focusing on where they are deployed, is reducing the murder rate. And it's a 10-year plan, because you can't just turn a switch on and off and change murder. I mean, murder is something that needs behavior change. It needs, you got to understand the causalities. But the first part of the program is boots on the ground. We have 20,000 police officers in our province. We have now 1,300 LEAP officers in our province. And they are focused on these focus areas, these 13 focus areas. And so you will see in Khayelitsha, in Mitchells Plain, in Nyanga, they are no longer in the top murder police precincts in South Africa anymore. In actual fact, the murder numbers have now moved from the Western Cape to the Eastern Cape and to the Northern, and to KZN and Gauteng, because of this project tackling the highest number. We still have, which is just, I just go crazy every time I even think of the number. We have 4,000 people in our province that are murdered every year. So hopefully over the next few years, that's going to drop to 2,000. Even 2,000, it's can't contemplate that number. But there were 26,000 people murdered in South Africa last year. And I would have thought long time ago there would have been a major freak out about the top management. The police minister would have lost his job. There's double-digit growth in murder in the percentages all across the board every single year. It's just an unacceptable number. And of course, we don't have those competencies within a constitutional mandate. But those are the boundaries that we're pushing. We want to change the constitution. We want to change models, and I think that's probably, if you have to say what are the big challenges, it's because at a national government level, there's a policy put in 30 years ago, 29 years ago. Policy was put in place. They don't test it to say, is it working or isn't it working? It isn't working, and you just keep with the same policy year after year. Einstein would have said that's the first sign of madness. We need to be able to be nimble. If that doesn't work, change it. Try something else. If that doesn't work, change it again. Use our amazing universities and use world best practice. And that's what we really try to do. We've got a key partnership with the Bavarians. In general, as the Western Cape and Bavaria are good partners. And in policing, we've got a good partnership between them. Between Bavaria and the Western Cape, between the Hans Seidel Foundation and our province, between a number of international, prime professors, etc. We work quite a lot with the City of Cape Town and the New York Police Department. So we try to stay ahead. You'll see technology-wise with those LEAP officers, they're all now getting body cams. We use our health data instead of police data to understand the impact of murder and the impact of attempted murder. So a murder will be a body. That body goes to a hospital and then to a mortuary. That mortuary then will produce a report. But that body was collected after a gunfight. And so it's GIS mapped when we collect the time of day. And we take all of that data, we overlay it with other data. The city does data based on shot spotters. So we've got technology that works out where shots are fired from. Those end up in heat maps. Those heat maps get overlaid over the ambulance map. So where a stabbing victim or a shooting victim goes taken to a trauma unit, what did it happen, what time? So then that says, well, now we need to start deploying those officers at that time. The cameras need to be put in those areas. And so, that's the stuff. It's not quick fix, but as long as you continually bringing in new ideas, new technology, and zooming into where the problem is, you'll start to see a change in the data. And the data is now saying that there is something happening. The interesting thing now is that Gauteng seem to be saying the same kinds of things. And, we're happy to share. We're happy to learn from each other. Because at the end of the day, I think everything that we do in the Western Cape, obviously I do for the citizens of the Western Cape, but I actually did for South Africa.
Well, that's really good to hear that Gauteng is sharing. When we have an election next year, 2024, the likelihood is that the Gauteng and KZN will have different governments, and perhaps they'll be able to learn from you. As you say, they are interested in that. But Premier, just to close off with just a few quick updates, and something that's baffled me on the way to Cape Town International Airport, on the left-hand side coming out of town, there is a huge, big power station sitting idle that it reminds me a little bit of Kelvin, which is doing such a great job in Johannesburg. What's happening there? Can that not be repurposed and being used to produce electricity?
Okay, so the difference between Kelvin and Athlone, the main difference visually is the one has these big towers, there's smoke coming out of it, and Athlone doesn't, because they were all imploded and destroyed. So when that power station wasn't used anymore, I mean, obviously those big coal stacks were blown up, and blown up doesn't sound right. They were, what do? They implode them and then they cart all the rubble away. But I can say that obviously it's got grid connection. So the city went out last week with its dispatchable power tender. That's calling for 500 megawatts of dispatchable power. Dispatchable power is battery, or it could be liquid natural gas. I think LNG has got a role to play, although we really want to move to green and renewable. But green and renewable, like sun and wind, don't always blow or don't always shine. So what's the dispatchable power? We're looking at probably LNG playing a role in Mossel Bay, in Saldanha Bay, and in Atlantis. Because at Atlantis and in Mossel Bay, we've got the two power stations, Gerikwa and Unkelig. Those are diesel power stations. The one in Athlone, the one in Atlantis is 2,000 megawatts. So it's a lot of power, but it runs on diesel, which is hugely expensive. When it's running full speed, our traffic officers have to manage the flow of trucks because they just never stop. coming from the refinery. They just keep going with diesel. But that dispatchable power tender, and I'm really hoping, and it sounds like it, but it sounds like some of the companies on battery are saying, let's use Athlone, which is an old power station. It already has all the EIAs. It already has the connectivity. Why don't we just now go and use that site for alternate energy supply? So hopefully that is a dispatchable energy unit. And hopefully from a looking at a green transition point of view, it becomes, say, a new technology battery site, which enables our renewables to charge that site and that site to then put power back in when needed at night, etc. So I really hope that does happen. So I think it's got a role to play, but unfortunately we can't fire it up that's what Germany's been doing. That's what half of Europe's been doing, is firing up their old nuclear power stations, firing up their old coal power stations because of the war. And I think there it's 19% of their energy supply into Europe was Russian gas. Now suddenly got this massive deficit, and they had to start up the non-green systems. The coal power stations that was a big decision for them to make, especially I think in Germany when the vice chancellor comes from the Greens and has spent years campaigning against coal, and now suddenly he finds himself in government and has got to make a hard decision. I think his own party is giving him a hard time for that. But those are the things you have to do when you get into government. You've got to make decisions, perhaps not in the interest of your own policy positions, but in the interest of your citizens and their requirements.
And thank you for a fascinating update on everything that's going through. The final question has to be devolution of power versus independence of the Cape. We're hearing now that the Cape independence movement is getting more traction. They're arguing, I did the numbers, and they are correct, that less than 25% of the people in the Cape have voted for the ANC or the EFF combined. So as a consequence, post-2024, the Western Cape, if it stays as it is, will have laws imposed upon it which will certainly be very different to those that are around today, and perhaps for economic growth. So where's that debate on your side? Are you making progress on devolution? Are you going to have a referendum on Cape independence? Just help us out here.
Okay, so first of all, obviously there's one thing we must understand, that even once, and the dispute now, let's start with the referendum. There's a dispute now as whether I can call a referendum today or not. And our legal advice, and we've tested it where possible, is that we have to wait for the regulation which empowers. It says so in the Western Cape Constitution. It also says so in the National Constitution. But as even when Helen was the Premier, we started that process of calling on the then President to put the regulation in place to allow for a referendum. And so that still hasn't happened. In our sort of discussions that we are having with other organizations in the region, it looks like there might be a court challenge from outside of government to say, let's actually put pressure on getting either the understanding that you can call a referendum without those regulations and a province can just go ahead. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But I also must say that a referendum is not necessarily the thing that says, okay, well, now it's done. That doesn't work that way. And of course, in a current system, even if there was a referendum of 100% that said, we want to be a different country, we are one country at the moment, and we have to go through processes for that to happen. And I can't see the National Assembly approving it. I can't see that happening. So for me, I don't think, and really, for me, it's about devolution of power and federalism, because quite frankly, the Cape exit is based on, we're saying that it's a political problem. We are unhappy with the politics of South Africa, so we want to have different politics in the Western Cape, and let's become a different region, a different country. Well, let's rather fix the politics. That's much easier. Fix the politics. Vote out the ANC. Put all that energy that you're putting in to trying to tell everybody that we've got to be a different country based on whatever. Why don't you put all of that energy in to consolidating vote to actually change the country? And that, again, will give you the opportunity to get federalism to a way better space than possible, because we've just spoken about policing powers, and that's a fight between a provincial government and a national government, and hopefully more provinces will join in that fight. And I actually think it's attainable, and I can see there's a movement towards attaining those changes. I think we're going to see it earlier in public transport and in rail devolution. And I listened to some of the comments that the president was making yesterday, along with the transport ministry, on how we're going to speed up powers of transport moving to cities and regions. Now that says to me, I think we're going to get traction before policing on that. There's another devolution of power, which is exactly what we want to have. And so I think that there's this movement happening. But also, we must also, I want to come back to independence. At the end of the day, I also look at the vote. We might say 25% or whatever, but in actual fact, in the last test where people had the opportunity, less than 1% of the people voted for Cape Exit, less than 1%. And in actual fact, the leader from Cape Exit that went to the city of Cape Town didn't last days and then resigned. That doesn't really show real commitment. And so I still again say, I believe in federalism, in devolution of power. Our constitution is written in that way. And I'm a proud South African. And so that's why everything I do in the province is for the citizens of this province, but also for our country. And we can change South Africa, and we can change it next year. There's a massive opportunity.
Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, ending up with the plan B that many people are looking at if the ANC and the EFF were to come to a coalition and rule the country after the 2024 election. But obviously, his response would be, don't let that happen and vote for the others. It's been a pleasure as always, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.